Hello and welcome back. This is MC1 Gamer. Bring you a follow-up on the FAQs that just came out and is just lighting the community, the environment on fire regarding Age of Sigmar and a whole bunch of validations and changes in terms of what how to interpret some of these rules and just follow-up questions. I think this is great that GW is doing this. The word I got early on was they're not going to be doing this, but I'm glad they are because it kind of puts stuff to rest. But it's good that they are, and certainly I'm going to say it right off the bat. There are a couple of these things where I was completely wrong, and quite a few that I was completely right. More often than not. There's only a couple where I got the wrong indication or gotten feedback from really good sources that's kind of being turned around now. I never proclaimed that I knew anybody on the rules committee, and nobody who's not on the rules committee can claim that they knew for certain anything. And there's plenty of people. My God, I was in the car driving back from a meeting, and I cannot begin to tell you how many dings I got on my messenger and texts and emails regarding this. I managed to go and reply to a couple of them, and it's amazing how many people were, how smug some of these people were. The "I told you so"s. Look, let me just say this, guys. For anybody who's listening and tuning in, even a broken clock is right twice a day. All right. We first of all, it's astonishing. I know I look like I take this hobby way too seriously, and there are some times where maybe I get my passion gets the better of me. But I am not so far gone that I cannot dial it back and say, hey, I called this wrong, or I portrayed something that was clearly is not the way GW is intended. I'm not infallible, but I will say this: it is comical the way some of you have responded to this, and just the fervor that some people have. But I guess you answer fire with fire, and I do want to have one disclaimer to all this, which is something that I've been proclaiming from the beginning, which apparently a lot of people just forget. In every thread that I've been in and every hangout that I've been, I've said the same thing. My mantra has been, hey, whether you agree with me or not, or whether I feel you're wrong or right, and the reverse, GW has invited us, even if they didn't, but GW has invited us to play this game the way we want. Play it the way you want. My motto has been, and I've been waving this flag very, not very recently, but quite fervently, that your fun isn't wrong. All right, there is no wrong way to play this game. However, there are rules, and GW clarified that these are default ways to play. They make it very specific, and we'll probably see that in one of these that I'm going to go through. This is the default way to play, and of course they invite you to make changes, and they even say it on the last page of the 4-page core rule book. Make changes as you wish. They're inviting you to, like, you didn't even need the license for this, but they're throwing it out there the same way I've done it in every one of these things. I mean, how many passionate I've been about specifically any rule that how I felt it's been played, and I still feel very passionately about some of these. But hey, that's my opinion. I've always said, play it however you want. Even if this is the way the game, look, if the game said black and white that this is how you deploy, you can change that. The GW has thrown it in there to kind of try to dispel all these arguments and all the nerd rage and all of the fury that people have and all the rules lawyering. Now, I've entertained that type of sparring about rules. So, it's certainly reasonable that if my viewpoint and how I interpreted things is contrary to what GW's clarification is in the FAQ, then hey, I'm wrong. So fine. But let's also realize that a lot of these rules and the clarifications are not going to sit well with everybody. And there's a couple here that are real op-ed issues. And no, I'm not going to burst the blood vessel, and no, I'm not going to freak out, and neither should you. But let's go through some of these things and see if we can get this thing done within an hour's time. So first of all, let's go through them. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands my position again on this. Play how you want. Okay, just play how you want. All right, I'm sure I'm going to say this many times, but let's talk about this. The armies. How large are the games meant to be? What number of units or heroes should be on each side? And they say Games can be any size. Of course they do, because they're not going to try to say this is how you want to play. They're giving you the freedom to play it. That's what Age of Sigmar is all about. So you just should discuss it with your opponent before you play. Of course, that's gentleman's comp or gentlewoman's comp. That's the don't be a dick comp. Of course, you're going to discuss in a casual game what kind of size of game you're going to play. Even in an organized event, you're going to know walking in, because the tournament organizers are going to give you a parameter to try to give everybody an understanding of what they're getting into. So that's pretty silly that people would even throw that in there. However, you know, the game, I played very small and very large games, and I'm really having fun experimenting with different styles of play. And I will say this, the game plays much smoother in that small to medium structure. Once you get to like the equivalent of 100 wounds or more, it does start bogging down. And I think the sweet spot is probably in the 80 to 100 wound, roughly, maybe a little bit more. Once you get higher than like 150 wounds, once you go to like 200 wounds, I played bigger than that too. It really, really is hard to manage. You really need tokens at all stages, but it does get very difficult. That doesn't mean you shouldn't and you can't. And if you want to, well, who cares? Go do it. I just think that the game is smoother, and that probably the sweet spot is that medium-sized game, that game that's probably just under the model count that was, say, tournament size for 8th edition. In any case, moving on, can you take more than one of any named special character along the lines of Nagash or Arcan in your army? And they say yes, which is insane. This just goes to show that even though GW is putting that out there and saying that you can, it's just not logical or makes sense. There's only one Nagash or Arcan in existence in the world. So it seems that this is going to be one of those things that, although they say yes, nobody's going to really allow it. And maybe some people might want to have, like I know one person was joking on one of our boards I'm a member of. He wanted to play 30 Sigvalds. Hey, go knock yourself out. You want to play 6 Nagashes, knock yourself out. If you've got the money to buy 3 Arcans, knock yourself out. I don't think anybody's going to do that more than one time novelty. I just can't see it happening. I think that's going to be one of those gentleman comp things or blanket comp that everybody accepts that is just going to happen. I'm really surprised that they say that. But on the other hand, not so surprised, because let's also realize that very realistically, they want to sell models. And if there's that one guy out there who is going to want to buy a bunch of Nagashes, they're going to sell them because they're in a business to make money. So it's kind of, look, they've always said that they're in their business to make models, not rules. They're doing this just as a courtesy to try and promote the game if it sells more product. So of course they're not going to say, yeah, you're only limited to one of these guys. But again, just let's be realistic. Let's just really try to have a level head here. Anybody who's going to have multiples of these super powered guys, it's a contentious issue with some people to see even one of these on the table, especially to see them in every game. I have a Nagash that I've lovingly converted, from the original sculpt to the way I like it and my own interpretation of the model. I've used him a handful of times. I wouldn't use him every game, and I sure as shit wouldn't use more than one. That would be foul. And if I went up against somebody who wanted to use multiples of some uber powerful guy, unique character, I'm sure as a novelty or as doing something fun or funny on a rare occasion, I would have no problem with it. But I sure wouldn't be doing it on a regular basis, and I wouldn't recommend it. The game gets, look, there's so many things that are the textbook definition of broken in other game systems that would exist in this game. Because everything is broken in this game, you just limiting some of these things can be looked at as ridiculous. But I just don't see the issue of excluding these characters ever at all. But I sure don't agree with the idea of having multiples of these ridiculous characters, because then you're getting to a whole new level of crazy in a game that already has, crazy is ratcheted up to 11. So that's my opinion. But hey, like everything else here, the caveat is play it how you wish. And if you have opponents that are happy with that, knock yourself out. Okay, if casualties are split into 2 groups, is it forced to reform the next time it can possibly make a move? All right, so the answer they say is no. It can remain stationary. But the answer in effect is yes, when you want to make a move, you have to then reform to where the cohesiveness of that unit is reestablished. They have to maintain cohesion within a certain distance of each other based on the standard rules. But do you have to make the move to reform them and bring that unit cohesion into play? So for instance, if you have a line of casualties, can you take the models that are killed from the center and now you have look like two separate units? No, this is still one unit. And if they move, they then have to move where the end of that move has to bring them back into unit cohesion. But no, you can choose not to move. You're not forced to then make unit cohesion. And this is something that I agreed with before as well. All right. Can I choose to inflict wounds on a unit in such a way that the removal of any casualty will cause the unit to be split into two or more groups? Yes. Basically, you can decide as the defending person where the wounds are coming from. When a casualty is removed, you can decide. It says it in the rule. I think this is kind of one of those default ones where it's just like, why are we asking this question? It comes down to, I guess just clarification to try and deal with maybe a lot of the other issues that may be happening with other questions. Okay, whatever. Yeah, the bottom line is no. Yes, you can do that, but if you move, then you have to go into unit cohesion. All right, so let's go all right, there we go. So that was this one. All right, so for some reason I'm flubbing the actual. There we go. We're going to get back to. All right, so I have not stopped broadcasting, people. I'm going back. There we go. All right, so let's see if this is working. Is it? No, it's not. Okay, so I'm going to go and stop presenting, and let's go to presenting on my desktop once again. Let's try that. All right, let's see if that's working, because I was trying to go to the next screen and it just didn't like that. So let's make sure if that's working or not, and we'll go to the next one. Yes, okay. The combat phase. Sorry about that, guys. I just had a little bit of a hiccup there. The combat phase. How is pile-in measured? Okay, so pile-in. The pile-in movement is measured in the same way as normal movement. No part of the model may move further than the pile-in distance. In addition, when a model piles in, it must finish the pile-in move closer to the nearest enemy model. I cannot stress this enough. So many people forget that part. The model, not the unit necessarily, but your model in the unit needs to pile towards the nearest enemy model. So if there's several units surrounding your unit, and there are some that are not already base to base with another model that it's engaged in combat with, you can't go towards the one you want to. You need to go towards the model for that model in your unit that's piling in towards the nearest enemy model. This is going to cause all kinds of fun stuff, but this is how it's done. I've been playing it this way. I see a lot of people not playing it this way, so I'm glad this was clarified. Can a model that is piling in move around friendly units in order to reach the closest enemy model? Yes, of course it can. If it has the distance to do so, it can and it should. It's trying to move towards the nearest enemy model, and if there's something in its way, it's going to move around it, provided it can fit. And it says, provided you can move around, yeah, you can fit. Can a unit break coherency while it piles in? No. All right. The unit must finish any moves with all models within 1 inch of at least another model from its unit after all the unit's moves are completed. And this includes piling in. This makes complete sense. If you have one of those crazy rules, which we're going to go into in one of the further ones down below, where you have, say, like you could pile in 6 inches, you still need to go towards the nearest model, and it gives you more room to navigate and to get more guys into combat. But you still need to go towards the nearest model. And if you can't get there, guess what? It doesn't. You don't get there, and you have to worry about the pile in for the next turn. So, and if you do break coherency, you have to end that pile in coherency. Can a model pile in, i.e. move 3 inches in an ongoing combat from a previous round to allow more models to get into melee range as they pile in? Yes, as long as each model that is moved finishes its move near the closest enemy. Yes, that makes complete sense. All right, and that's exactly how I think most people have been playing it. If you're already in contact with a model, do you still get to pile in and rotate around enemy units? And it says no. Yes, I've been saying this all along. Of course, I did go through this, by the way, guys. But yes, I've been saying this all along. I know that we see this sometimes in 40K, and a lot of people that have come over from 40K have tried to promote this. And people are doing this like slide, this like electric slide around models in successive turns so they can get more guys piled in. No, once you are touching the model, once you have engaged into combat, or once you're within range where you've piled into the point where you're now sufficiently close to the nearest model, you don't further pile in with that model. That model doesn't slide to make more room. That's why there's successive pile-ins. So those models that in that unit that were not in range in combat then navigate around the guys that are now engaged in combat and are getting closer to the nearest model, and they can try to slide around the guys who are up there fighting. It makes complete sense, but there's no sliding to make room. If you want to do it in some cases where you're displacing one guy because you don't want to move all your models, well, I think that's one of those things that could be defined as cheeky, but yeah, again, deal with your opponent for that. All right. Can a model unit pile in if there's no line of sight but is within 3 inches? Yes, you can. You could be on the other side of a wall, but if you're within 3 inches on the other side of that wall and your movement allows you to pile in, you can do it. It's not about the obstacles or line of sight. It's about the distance. All right, if a model like a High Prince on a Griffin has the ability to pile in 6 inches rather than the standard 3, can they pile in if the unit is more than 3 inches from the enemy? The answer is no. The reason for this is that the pile-in ability is static. It is a static rule at 3 inches from an enemy model, allowing you to pile in and engage in combat. The increased range to pile in is an improved ability to gain more models from that unit, get them into combat, whatever combat it is. So, for instance, if your unit is within 3 inches of an enemy unit, all right, you can get more of your guys into that combat than, say, another unit that only could pile in the standard 3 inches because you have 6 inches. Now, this also opens up some other things. What if the guys in the back of that unit are 4 inches away from, or more from the main unit that you're within 3 inches of, but they're within 6 inches of an enemy unit, and closer to another enemy unit, but not within the standard 3 inches? Technically, you can then pile in those models towards the nearest enemy model because they have a larger pile-in range, and effectively spread that unit out amongst many, several effective combats. So let me give you an example. You're 3 inches away from an enemy unit, which allows you to make the pile-in, but your cluster of the models in your unit are further away as well. You have the special rule for 6 inch pile-in, and you're 5 inches in the back. The guys in the back are 5 inches from a second enemy unit. Now, being 5 inches away from that second enemy unit didn't allow you to pile in. Being 3 inches away from the main enemy unit is what allowed you to pile in. But because you're closer, all right, in the back to another enemy unit, a secondary enemy unit, than you are to that primary one that you're piling in, when you pile in, those guys in the back need to move towards the nearest enemy model. And because they have 6 inch pile-in range, they're gonna get there. So it does open up some other things that you might not think is possible. The main thing to understand is that the ability to make the pile-in is based on that 3 inch rule. The range is based on standard 3 inch rule, but if you have a special pile-in at 6 inches, you don't get the pile-in range starting at 6 inches. You just get a longer pile-in range. And then the rule kicks in as well that you must pile in near the nearest enemy model. So it does open up all kinds of ludicrous stuff, and that's fine because that's the way the game works. Okay. Next. Let's see, if my unit's pile-in move to one unit brings me within a guy's pile-in range of another, does that allow the unit to pile in if it hasn't already done so? Yes. Okay, makes sense. All right. So once again, I need to move to the next one, and let's see how this is going to work. There we go. All right. I didn't want this to be full screen, guys, because I don't have this little button here. Okay. Abilities. Are the effects of multiple duplicate spells and abilities stackable against the target? Now, this is sorry about this, guys. This is one of those situations where people are talking about, I'm going to make this a little bit closer. People are talking about stacking spells, like Mystic Shield is a great one. Look, they say the default rules have always stated that you can do this. I don't like it because I don't like stacking Mystic Shields where you suddenly are invulnerable, but they are saying this in later on in another element here. Yes, you can do this and go ahead and do it. So yeah, you can stack it, but I see most comps prevent it. I do it most of the time in my own games. I'm running an event this weekend where I'm not allowing stackable Mystic Shields. It's, again, choose what you want to do if you want to change these things. They even mentioned that again in this. Several abilities trigger when you roll 6 or more with a positive or negative modifier from a spell ability. Will a positive or negative modifier for a spell ability affect this? Yes, a 6 with a -1 modifier will become a 5, for example. Of course, you can't get this thing of 6 or more if you're not including modifiers. It seems pretty boilerplate there. What happens if 2 abilities from the same dice roll, for example, Screamers of Tzeentch, which near any demon heroes of Tzeentch, treat all rolls of hits of 6 as hits rolls of 1, were hit by a unit for which a hit roll of 6 produces a mortal wound, and the player whose turn it is taking place uses their ability first. Okay, that makes sense. You need to have an order of actions, and that's what it actually does say in the Warscrolls, in the actual rules. But that absolutely makes sense. A lot of the things that they are referred to, where you go in order, but things in a lot of cases defer to whose turn it is. 2 rules allow my model to ignore more wounds or mortal wounds when it suffers them. Do I roll twice in order to avoid them, or 2 rolls allow it, or really only once, as both rules trigger the same action at the same time? That needs to be worded better. Roll twice, 1 for each ability. That makes sense. If you have an armor save, regular save, and then you have a mortal wound specific save, you're going to roll basically each time for those abilities. If you have, and that makes a whole lot of sense. I wonder if that's, if it's a mortal wound inflicting ability, you only get the mortal wound save, of course. I think that just makes sense. This one, some of these questions I think are again people hoping to get some kind of a different answer, or maybe it's a tag to another question. All right, if a model is within X of itself, i.e. if Arkin the Black uses ability to increase the range of his spells cast by wizards within 18 inches, will this mean that Arkin's spell will also have increased range? Yes, we're going to see this for command abilities as well. You are within that range of yourself. It affects you as well. If a unit leaves the battlefield for whatever reason and comes back, do they lose any bonuses they had from abilities or spells? Also, if they had a once per game ability, does it reset? It is the same unit, so no in regards to both questions. If the model have been slain and are being used to represent a different unit, then yes. So if there's some way that it's like recycled, like for example, there's a scenario where you have a portal and you can recycle units. You're basically taking casualties that you have and you can bring them back in as repurposed units. That doesn't mean that those are the same guys being reincarnated. They are different guys with the same abilities with the same war scroll. So that makes complete sense. All right. There are abilities that come into effect when a roll is made of more than 6. For example, Lord Caliston healing 1 wound on a target, Stormcast Eternal unit on a save of 7 or more. Does Warhammer Age of Sigmar use the same roll of 6, then 4 plus whatever? Yeah, that's the convention I see in Bolt Action. No, you don't do it. It's very similar to what we did in 8th edition. No, it is the 7 or more. You don't get, if it's not more than 6, you don't go to 4 up and then 5 up or whatever. It doesn't work like that. It's 7 or more. It's the 1 roll with the modifiers. The battle begins. What is set up exactly? I love this. Oh my God. People out there are priceless. Okay. Setup is typically when a unit is placed on the table during deployment, but can also refer to a unit being deployed in a location other than on the battlefield, or being put into play once the game has started. A unit using Stormcast Eternal, Warrior Chambers, Lightning Strike, the Chameleon Skinks Ambush, or a Tree Lord Spirit Path ability, for example. Yes, this makes complete sense. They're a part of the game. They're just deployed differently. They're part of your wounds or models or however you do it, whatever comp, or if you're just using standard. They're part of what's part of the game. So the standard is that if you place them to the side for some special rule, they still count as part of the game. What is in your case? What is on your shelf? It's not part of the game. But of course, we're going to see that when we talk about summoning in a little bit. Then, of course, that breaks that rule a little bit. But hey, for this purpose, it's what's in the game is in the game. And when you have your army set up during deployment, that's what it is. You're declaring this is deployed to the side. How do you deploy units in a battalion with special deployment rules? Like, for instance, the Wood Elves Wandering Host. All units in a War Scroll battalion can be set up as one deployment. That's very interesting. Or individually. As you set up each unit, declare to your opponent if it's using any special deployment rules. There you go. It's just what I said. So that should be pretty obvious. You're declaring I'm deploying this. This is the amount of wounds or models I'm putting on the table based on whatever game size you're playing and whatever comp you're playing, if you're playing with any. And then you put that to the side, and then it enters the game, as such. Next one. Do the casualties your opponents inflict on summoning units count against your casualty total? Of course they do. It even says it in the core rules. I don't understand why this is being retreaded, but hey, okay. If a unit dies and comes back to life, are they still counted as casualties? No, they are not. Look at that. Now, some comps say yes. I mean, you look at something like the Green Knight. He keeps coming back. It's not a different Green Knight. It's the Green damn fucking Knight. Unless, of course, you're playing a game where you have 10 Green Knights. Of course, maybe that's the same guy. So I guess that's one of the benefits of using those abilities. I can see some people comping that out in certain tournaments. I think it's fine. I think that's part of what gives them that power, that oomph. It should not be considered casualties for victory purposes. But again, you want to institute it, go ahead. In my event coming up tomorrow, not tomorrow, Saturday, we're going to be counting that as victory points, which means you can almost have a battery. You defeat it, you should get credit for it. But I guess that's something that can be debated, and I might actually turn that around and change that in successive events. I don't know if I want to do that right before an event comes out, though. That would be a little bit radical. And I learn forward to the players. All right, if a battle plan says do not use victory conditions from the Warhammer Age of Sigmar rule sheet, does this indicate is this invalidate? Yes, of course it does. If it says don't use the rules from the core rules, the victory conditions, don't use them, that's what it means. And if you choose that you want to use it, then you can go ahead and do it. But yes, that's what it means. All right. Can either player choose to attempt a sudden death victory if they get outnumbered by the opponent during the game? No. I know right off the bat. I could see they said it's not during the game. Sudden death is determined before the game starts. It's after deployment is finished, but before you start the game. And that's what they said here in the answer. It doesn't happen in the midst of the game where suddenly, you summon up an additional number of units, or you defeated your opponent to the point where now you massively outnumber them. No, it doesn't work like that. Can models set up somewhere other than the battlefield in a Celestial Realm example and use their abilities or command abilities? No. Yes, that's exactly what I've been saying. It's like the same thing I've been saying, where if you had a model sitting on the side of the table, it's not part of the game. Does it have an impact on the game table? No, it shouldn't. Then it doesn't, and that's what they say. Okay. Death. If Righteous Smiting is cast twice or more on the same unit, do the effects stack in any way? I.e., would it generate an additional 2 or more attacks every time a 6 or more is rolled to hit? No, it doesn't, because of the wording of the spell. There's many of these indications. It's like, for instance, with the corpse card. It gives you that ability for some units in the death range to get enhancements if any corpse card is in range, not for each corpse card is in range. So if you read the spell, I'm sure that if I pull it up, it might have a less clear wording, but this is what they say, and I think that was the intent, and they've cleared up. Thank you very much. So, okay, let's go zoom this in a little bit more. War Scrolls and War Scroll battalions. Will War Scrolls from models that are being discontinued be maintained? They say yes, and they have obviously no intention of removing it, at least not at this time. But that's great that they have actually said yes. They are, they're going to be maintained. They're still there. Great. This basically is what a lot of us have been saying. Stop freaking out about the discontinued model lines. The armies still are available. They're still viable, and they still are playable. Yes, they've been removed from the app, but there's still War Scrolls for them out there. And they're still, fully playable. And in a lot of cases, even in the app, they still exist. All right, here's the one that I disagree with, but hey, again, it's your opinion. Play it how you wish. If I have 2 different War Scrolls for the same unit, can I choose which to use, or must I use the most recently published version? And I said that you pretty much should decide, but the default really should be to keep a standard so everybody knows what's going on. The most recent version. You can use which War Scroll you want to use, but it may be more convenient for your opponent if you use the most recent published version, especially if the earlier version is no longer readily available. Yeah, because your opponent should have an understanding based on the most updated version of a War Scroll that's what they're using. But if the updated version is a different title. It's a different name, which has happened many times. Some of the name versions have been genericized. I don't know if that's a real word, but in any case, yeah, you use whatever's appropriate. I think you should just do one of those things. It's that thing in advance. Hey, I'm using this version of this war scroll, and have it so that the person can look at it, read it, understand it. But no big surprises, no gotchas. All right. How do things like hornblowers and standard bearers work? Do you lose attacks for them, or do you get the benefit for having a model with a standard? Yeah. You gain the benefit unless specifically stated otherwise. So yeah, they still can fight to their full capability, unless it says differently, that it replaces it. I don't remember if there's any of those cases. Can the leader of a unit take special weapons like a grand hammer? Yes. That's pretty much says that the champion effectively of the unit has certain options. When selecting models for a War Scroll battalion, do named characters count towards the requirements? It gives you an example, but they say yes. They can be taken if they have the appropriate keywords on the War Scroll. Thus, Skarbsnik can be used as the Night Goblin War Boss of a Great Moon clan. This is great. I love that. This is something that's been gone back and forth, and a lot of people discussed. And I think it could have been argued either way, but it's nice that they kind of clarify that, because I think it's a good clarification. Empire archers and Bretonnian mounted yeomen have a similar ability to make a move as if it's in the movement phase after setup. And are these two abilities different, or do they mean the same thing despite the different wording? And they really just basically say they amount to the same effect, they just use different wording, which, I guess that could be confusing. But look at the rules as they're written and understand that it essentially gives you that ability. Just because it's written in a different way, it's not a non-standardized way of doing it, doesn't mean that it doesn't have the same effect, which I can understand the frustration with people, saying, oh, but maybe it's, they're looking at every grammatical error or whatever. All right, so moving on. Destruction. For a Great Moon clan, when you roll a 6 or more to hit, you get an extra attack with that weapon. Is that a flat extra attack, or do you use the weapon's attack characteristic? It is a flat +1 attack. Thank you very much. This is a very big distinction. All right, you get an extra attack with that weapon. It doesn't say you get an extra attack series like you have in your profile. It's just one extra attack. All right, Stonehorns. Do you have the number of wounds done, i.e. before rolling for die 3 or die 6 damage, or the amount of damage done? And it says you have the damage inflicted after the attacks made by the attacking unit have been carried out. Now that's a little bit vague. The way rolling for wounds is supposed to be is, and this is what it was clarified in the main core rules, and I think there's something that kind of conflicts with this later on in this FAQ, is that you roll your attacks, you add up all the attacks that hit, you roll to wound, you add up all the total numbers of wounds, okay? And those are the wounds done, and then what's done is damage. All right, the damage is done after you make your saving throws. So what they're saying here is it's not the damage done. Like, for instance, you then roll die 3, die 6, and it's half of that. What they're saying is that anything that gives you take half wounds from something is done before the calculation of and if I'm reading this correctly, it's after the attacks are made by the attacking unit have been carried out. So you roll the number of attacks and you roll the number of wounds, but you haven't done the damage calculator, all right, which is also the number of wounds inflicted. So that's astonishing, because if you hit with 10 and you wound with 4, but each of those 4 do die 3 wounds each, you don't roll the wounds, roll saves, and then the number of wounds is halved. You half that, and then the Stonehorn gets its save. That seems the way that I'm reading it, and that's just the way it seems that they're eluding it. But I'm going to go on a limb and say, hey, people are going to read that differently. And if you feel differently, feel free and tell me, because I'm sure it can be read either way. But that's the way I'm reading it. I like to clarify on the Trolls too dumb to die rule. Do you start allocating wounds to Troll 1 and then make a too dumb to die check when he would die, continuing if he fails, and then move on to Troll 2? And that's, yes, that makes sense. I remember that rule. Played against that once, and that just seems to be logical the way it was written. Okay. Charge phase. When you're rolling for a charge move, should you declare who you intend to charge with first? And the answer, no. And that's exactly the way everybody should be playing, because it says that clearly. You roll to see what the charge range is, and then you decide what's in range, what you want to charge. You're not declaring, like in 8th edition, what you're charging first. It does say, however, something here. Note that if you don't have to make the charge, even if the unit is in range, unless the charge has an ability that specifically says otherwise. So if you roll and you say I'm charging, and you roll, and there are 2 units that theoretically could be within range, but you don't want to charge the closer unit on second thought afterwards, you can decide just not to make the charge because you really wanted to see if you could make that in 12 or 11 for the further unit. And the caveat to that is that unless there's a rule that compels you to charge, you must charge, you could then decide not to make that charge because you only rolled well enough to get within range of that secondary target that is closer. Hey, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. And I just learned something new there. And I don't know if that's ever come up before. Okay, moving on. Wizards. If I have several wizards, can I cast Mystic Shield multiple times in the same unit? They say yes. Again, this is one of the most commonly comped things, so that you can't Mystic Shield a 5-up save down to a 1. It's a lot. I have to say that it's a lot of magical power to get one unit down to a 1, and a Mortal Wound can still get through that. So I don't have too much of a problem with it, but I know a lot of people that like the idea of ones always failing. But I know a lot of people that like the idea of not having multiple Mystic Shields stacking up. So this is one of those things where comp's going to override it. Your playstyle is going to override it. Decide what you want and play it how you want. Okay, here's the big one. Can the summoning spells on some Warscrolls be used by an appropriate caster, even if none of the armies from the Warscroll are in my army? They say yes. This is where I grab my shoe, get out my salt shaker, spread it around, and start chewing on the laces, working my way down to the rubber sole. Look, I don't agree with this, but that's the FAQ. This is what they're saying. It's contrary to just about every one of these rules that they're saying. Units not on the table, not having an impact in the game. Battalion scrolls. Can I deploy half of the battalion and still get the battalion ability because I have the other half in my bag? The fact that the rules state that in the rule specifically states that all the rules for the Warscrolls are on the unit's Warscroll, for a unit, or on its own Warscroll. The fact that it's not duplicated, or it doesn't even say some caveat that says, if the effect for spells from other Warscrolls might, come into play, or something along those lines. They have clarified that summoning is open. It's unbound. It's completely Wild West. And I feel that this is unfortunate because I think it makes summoning even more powerful. Like as if it wasn't powerful already. Like if it isn't one of the most readily comped and overcomped things that people already have. It's one of the most contentious things that people discuss. I don't agree with this, but this is what they say, and this is the FAQ, and this is supposedly now official from GW. So there you go. When I'm done with this video, I'm going to start working on the right shoe. And I'll when I finish with my left, I'll take a look and see what kind of responses there are to this video. Because yeah, I said it, I need my shoe if they do this. This is completely contrary to the way the game is built and to the logic of how the game is organized. But there's not supposed to be any army-wide rules. There's not supposed to be any universal rules. But guess what? This one is different. It's not like GW hasn't made contradictory rulings before. It's not like they haven't backtracked on things before. But it's also not like you can't change this or comp it or decide not to play it this way. And if you do, guess what? You now have license to do so. And if you're playing with other people of a like mind, why not? And I will say this right off the bat because I've said it earlier and I'm going to say it again. And I've said it in every time I've had this discussion. I felt people were wrong in this interpretation. It turns out I was not right. So I wasn't right. Okay, I wasn't right. I got this one wrong, okay? But it doesn't mean you can't play the way you want. And they invite you to, and they say it in the core rules that were originally published, and they're going to say it again in one of these. So yeah, you now summoning is from, and if you have Warscrolls in the army, in the faction that says that all wizards of this type can cast this spell, then all wizards can cast it. That's what they're saying. So unless you're in a comp environment or decide to self-comp in a casual game, this is how it's played. I will play this way, fine. I'm not going to complain. My main army is death. I felt that it was a little bit more of a trade-off to be more conservative with this, and it just made more sense. The fact that this is not the case and that they're going the other direction, saying if it's on a Warscroll and it says all Death Wizards have this, if it's not on their Warscroll, all the Death Wizards now have it, that you have one wizard sitting on the table at the beginning, and you could just summon anything. All the Warscrolls that have summoning spells on them as a Death Wizard, you can now summon an entire undead army. It makes the undead, it makes the death factions and any summoning factions that much more powerful. And well, you know what? If you're playing faction by faction, that's going to matter. It will have an impact, though, and I think it already has in terms of the new releases for certain factions. Things like the Stormcast are very tough. Things like that Star Drake are very tough, and I think that they're probably going to be doing that to try and counter the fact that some of these other models and other factions and other mechanics and other factions are extremely powerful, like summoning. That, that's kind of way that some of these things will balance out in some respects. But let's also realize that out of the box, this game is unbound, and you can take whatever you want from wherever. It's going to be pretty interesting if you play, barring any limitations in certain events and whatnot, if you play a game with a bunch of Stormcast and throw in one lizard man priest that can summon. I forget if it's this, right off the bat, if it's this lizard man priest that can summon, or if it's just oh God, I'm blanking out. The frogs. I can't believe I'm blanking out. But if it's just the one caster, you take one caster from your faction that can do some summoning, and then you suddenly can pop in a whole bunch of other guys to hit on. Look, this game is crazy, and I think that if you're just limiting just by factions, then you're creating a whole new level of comp. But most people like to play that way. In the event I'm playing, you could take one primary faction and one secondary faction. So it kind of opens up a little bit more. But even within factions, there is the ability to do summoning in almost every faction. I don't know if Death, obviously Destruction has it. Death, of course, does. Chaos, of course, does. And Order does. But if you're just playing Stormcast, of course you're not going to. But hey, now you have a good reason to take a summoning guy. In any case, that's what they're saying. It's completely unbound. All right. If I summon a wizard, can the wizard use his magic ability in the same hero phase? Yes. You're the free right you always have, but that's one of the things a lot of people comp. I'm actually comping that from the event that I'm running this weekend, where if you cannot cast spells if you've been summoned in, if that model's been summoned in. I like that. I happen to like that. But it prevents the chain summoning and the endless summoning. But hey, look, if you don't think that that's necessary, go comp it, and if you like it completely unbound, go play it however you want. When models are slain and removed from play, can they be brought back into play using abilities or spells that allow you to summon new models? Of course, but it's a new unit. I don't think they explained that in the way that I think the question was asking. If it's a restoration mechanic, like you have a banner that restores Daisic skeletons, that's different. But is a summoning ability that brings in a new unit, it's a new unit. It's not the same unit. So I don't know why that was needed for clarification. Wizards that can cast multiple spells have the wording that they can attempt to cast X different spells per turn. Does this mean that they cannot cast the same spell more than once in a turn? Yes, that's kind of what it says in the game. Yeah, you can't duplicate the same spell from the same caster. Can you summon slain models, dice permitting, forever and ever and ever? I don't really understand what you'd say. Say yes, but slain models, dice permitting? If you have the models and you are summoning, you can keep summoning. Yeah, why? I don't understand. If I have 1,000 skeletons and I want to keep summoning skeletons, can I keep summoning them? And if I lose some of those, can I reuse the models to populate new units that I'm summoning? Of course you can. Just have the models. If you summon and you don't have the models, you're shit out of luck. You're relying then on the casualties. I don't understand the reason why some of these questions are asked, but hey, yay, people want clarifications. The battlefield. How is the terrain intended to be used? Simply to block line of sight or for use of Warscroll rules? The scenery models from the Citadel range have Warscrolls that use the rules on their Warscroll. Scenery models that do not have Warscrolls for the use use the rules on the Warhammer Age of Sigmar rule sheet. So, for example, if you're using a Citadel Wildwood, you're using a Citadel Wildwood. You use those. If you're using a Watchtower, you're using a Watchtower. If it doesn't have, if it's like some kind of weird thing that you've made some weird obelisk or a strange, a ruin, and there's not a specific model that you're using with a specific war scroll, then you're using the randomly generated, or not, because I know a lot of people don't even use those, or just use them for specific scenarios, or just use them for like realm gates, or don't use them. But that's what they're saying, and that makes sense. Do units on hills benefit from cover? And they say no. And this is an interesting thing. I know some people have talked about this, and it's a placed piece of terrain. Is it a battlefield feature or is it a piece of scenery? They're saying it's not. It's part of the battlefield. Makes sense. I think it's a big difference between a hill and a building or a piece of wood, a forest or whatever. Walls or fences. Those are very clearly pieces of scenery. Hills could be considered just an enhancement onto the battlefield that you've placed to try and make the battlefield more interesting. That's what they're saying. Fine. I'm good with that. No more hills giving you +1 to saves. I will be adjusting that accordingly. The armies, how large is the game meant to be? Okay, the game is okay. I think we've gone through it all, guys. All right, so we've gone around the bend here because we just went and did this. One of the ones I think I've missed here, and I think I've missed a couple of these, and you go ahead and look at these. This one very big one, so please don't tune out if just thinking that we're done here. If you're tuning in and watching this and you want to click the X button, there's one very big one, and I think I just messed up and didn't copy all of these Warscrolls from the net, where it says the big question is, how do you allocate wounds? If you inflict wounds on a model that has multiple wounds, can you choose as a defender to inflict any additional wounds onto other models in the unit? And there is a clarification here. This is a big one, guys. And this is one that I've also fought vehemently, and I was right about. So, all you smug guys are trying to point out the few things that I was wrong about. Hey, look, I'm fallible. I made mistakes, but this one I was right about. This is what they said. They said you inflict wounds on a model in a unit, and you continue to do so until it dies, and then you inflict it on another model. You do not spread them out from successive attacks in successive combats. You have to continue to apply the wound to the existing wounded model until it is destroyed, remove it, and then any additional wounds go on to another model, and then you keep going until the unit is destroyed. That is how it works, and that's how they're doing it. And again, if you don't want to do it that way, don't. Be my guest. In any case, that is it. That's all that I have. I think I missed at least one sheet. I'm sorry for that, but I invite you all to go look at the FAQs. They're all around the internet. Have fun with them. Choose how you wish to play. Freak out at your peril, but just understand that they actually made a comment in one of these FAQ iterations that you just make a decision if you want to play this. I think this is just them saying these are the default standardized rules that everybody should play. But if you choose in your community, in your group, or at an event, if they're going to comp something, there's nothing wrong with that. And there really isn't. Your fun is not wrong. But I invite and encourage people to try to play as much as they can according to the default rules and according to the FAQs as they are listed, and just have fun with it and use scenarios to balance things out. Do not look at just the tournament style of game. This game flourishes when you engage in a scenario environment, in a narrative environment, and in successive games that are linked with implications. If you play one game and you do real well, you may have benefits that may impact with those triumphs on the next game. This is how I'm running my event this weekend. The army is going to be imbalanced, but the scenarios are going to provide benefits to the disadvantaged, and even the outnumbered or the more stronger armies will have ways to still gain benefits in successive games where things can be flip-flopped in later games. It's not perfect, but it is a way to play the game that's a little bit different. And if you just play tournament style, where you try to even out the fights as closely as you possibly can, keeping in mind that all comp is not going to be equal. It's not always going to be balanced. It's just another way of balancing the game, and it's just altering the game to whatever your style of play is. You're missing out on a whole range and a whole spectrum of ways to play, and that's unfortunate. I really encourage people to try to play the game as written, as obviously we're getting some intention as well here with these clarifications, of which I'm sure we'll see more of. It's unfortunate we're going to have these reams of paper to show these clarifications now, which is, but hey, if it makes the game better, it makes your experience better, more power to you. Thank you guys for tuning in, everybody, and hey, have a great day.